Okay, well, as you know, my name is Andreasson, and I will be moderating this panel. The panel is on the status of web accessibility in Europe, and of course, Mikael just gave us an indication of where we are given the EIII benchmarking results, and now the panelists will add to this. And I think it's a good panel because they bring different perspectives to this, as you will find out. So we will go not in the order in which they sit, but in order in which I think it flows thematically. And so with that, I would like to begin by introducing Susanna Laurin. She's the CEO of Funka Nu, and they also have a project to look into web accessibility in Europe, but from a slightly different perspective. So please join me in welcoming Susanna. Thank you, Susanna. That was great. I know there's going to be questions, but we'll take them at the end. So we'll pass on to the next presentation. So the link between them, I said I would do them thematically, is that we're moving from Sweden to Poland. So thank you for mentioning Poland. And Jaroslaw will be happy. I'm not sure he will be talking about the Polish initiative. But Jaroslaw Ponder is the strategy and policy advisor and also the coordinator for Europe from the International Telecommunications Union in Geneva. And as soon as we get your slides up, Jaroslaw, I give the word to you. But please join me in welcoming Jaroslaw.
50 years ago, in order to communicate, to enabling the world to communicate. We accompanied the full system and evolution of the communication since so long, and we are doing this also, hoping that it will be continuing also in the era of the internet and maybe beyond. We are working mainly with the member states. Our focal points are the policymakers and the regulators. However, we are also on our platform having the stakeholders and the academia. This makes us very much privileged to interact with those who are setting up the policies for the ICTs and also advising those policies which are impacted by the ICTs. And this is the reason why the accessibility is so much of the important subject in the ITU. In the organization, we are dealing with different issues within the three sectors. We are dealing with the radio communication, standardization, development. We are present in the whole world. We are coordinating radio spectrum and assisting orbital slots for satellite, establishing global standards, technical standards, and regulatory recommendations, and we are helping to bridge digital divide. Out of all those three components and pillars, you will find a component which is relevant to the work at the global level on the accessibility, and you will find this work in the ITU results. But what is new? In 2014, the accessibility was put very high on the agenda, strategic agenda, by our membership, setting up the agenda for 2020, making the enabling environment, fostering accessibility across the world by 2020 happen. And this was the kickoff of really strengthened efforts, not only of the ITU as a secretariat, but also of under our membership, of engaging in particular activities and seeking the advice at the international level, what should be done in order to make this enabling environment happen. Of course, the subject is not new in the ITU. We had several success stories with the universal design principles, with some technical standardization proposals for reflecting the bump on the #5 key testature on the font. We're also developing new digital TV and radio systems and wireless hearing aids. Also producing quite substantive advice through the study groups on the access to telecommunication ICT services. But what recently we decided to do with the member states is to build upon the outcomes of the Convention on the rights of persons with disabilities and to prepare the policy report, because we believe that having in the portfolio 193 countries, there is a big potential of making the accessibility happen across the world, taking into account all possible technologies, including the web accessibility. And this brings me to the chapter 5. This report is free of charge and is open to all of you. So I will just point to the main issues and the advocacy which we are trying to convey to the policymakers and the regulators in order to make the accessibility happen. I believe that in Europe we are quite advanced in the approaches, and in this what we are doing. However, this is not the case all over the world, and always the best practices and the good reference points for the technologies but also the policy solutions are required. So therefore we are very happy to interact with your community and seeking also your support in taking a look what could be also recommended to the other regions, taking into account the possibility of interacting with those at the ITU platform. In the accessibility policy report, we are focusing exclusively on the public sector websites. We are not entering in the private sector and others. We believe that the governments should serve as the good example for the others, and there is significant amount of work to be done. We are of course following the international standards. We are not developing something new. The ISO, but also the web content accessibility guidelines, which are also providing us much more dynamic approach towards the proposals. We're taking a look and educating the regulators and policymakers, taking a look what can be built at the level of the national of the countries. Of course, advising that somebody has to be made accountable and appointed to follow up on this introduction of the new culture of introducing the accessibility as something to be done and to be addressed in the near future. Maybe for the time being this is not the obligation across the world, but with time I think that there is a big part of the work to be done is to educate those who will at a certain moment also need to use this kind of the services. So the report also demystifies the big aura of the accessibility. For many policymakers and regulators across the world, it's not the top priority, unfortunately. They're always stating that there are the other priorities, but it comes. And we believe that through the interaction with the regulators, with the policymakers, ICT agencies, these are good agents which are bringing the positive message on the accessibility across the world. So of course we are calling for the developing of the national policies in consultation with the persons with disabilities and conducting periodic reviews to address the changing technological developments and market conditions. Therefore, the results which we've seen today as well, this is something what I believe it will be of the huge interest of the global community as well and for the investigation. We are putting in the report the concrete proposal what should be done at the practical terms. Maybe those proposals are quite straightforward and easy to follow, but not that straightforward for some of those who are starting to introduce the challenge and do not want really to appear like the costly component on the political agendas of the governmental debates. And of course we encourage voluntary compliance by the private websites. What is becoming the new trend at the global level of becoming compliant with the standards, and we are advocating for this. But let's take a look what we are trying to achieve also at the level of the regional initiative for Europe on accessibility, which has been agreed at the development conference, this is 4 years World Telecommunication Development Conference, which provides the guidance of the countries and defines the requirements of the countries from different regions, including the Europe region, which in our case is 43 countries. So we are sharing the scope of those being part of the EU and also those who are still in the process of accession and maybe those who are still planning to be in this process. So as you will see, the countries are very clear. They are putting the accessibility very high on the agenda, following also the European standards. The most of the request is coming based on the requirements for the capacity building at the national level. And this is something what we are trying to do also with the showcasing of the best practices. And just in October, we will be organizing, based on the access policy report, the one meeting, putting together and bringing together to Serbia the policymakers, but also the practitioners, showing and demystifying that the accessibility can be really something what can be easily introduced at the national level. So those who are interested in joining this meeting are very kindly invited to this meeting. The other item which is also which has been identified as the priority was the procurement. We noticed that in terms of having the real impact at the edge in the public sector, very often we are coming to the hands-on approach, where the procurers, those who are defining the requirements for the services, including the web services, are not very much aware always that these requirements has to be there. So this is based on some analysis. We concluded that we have to go ahead with the free of charge online course with the certification by the end, based on the EU directives and the requirements, and we'll be seeking your also help in reaching out to those who are the procurers and whose life could be facilitated via this simple operation. Of course, we are doing other activities. We'll be present in the Rome Film Festival to advocate for the accessibility in the film production. We're doing some work with the broadcasters, trying to introduce the broadcasting in the broadcasting business, the technologies much more widely spread across the broadcasters, showing them the different technologies and teaming up also in this effort with the European Broadcasting Union in order to reach out to the appropriate community. In case you would be interested in joining the forces in terms of the assisting directly the countries, making the real work at the edge, and identifying some concrete work which can be done for the region, would be very keen to work with you and to take a look if there would be some opportunities for the joint collaboration. I invite you also to go through the rest of my slides, which will be posted. There's plenty of them with the reference points to the work of the ITU. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jaroslaw. That was terrific. We had a good panel so far, and I think Mikael and Susanna discussed the importance of benchmarking and assessing different methodologies, and Jaroslaw, of course, brought the inclusion or e-inclusion message. So you mentioned practical work, so that was a nice segue to the next two participants on the panel. And I'd like to start with Annika Nietzio. She represents FTB, which is the German Research Institute for Technology and Disability. And Mikael described her as a methods person for the EIII project. So without further ado, Annika.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. Okay, I'm the methods person, so I'm going to talk a bit about the kind of methodology that we have developed in EIII and a bit about the scientific work that we've been doing. We heard from Susanna in her presentation that there are a lot of methodologies out there in Europe, and they are all different with some respect. So let me start with the core part of each methodology. That's the things, the criteria that we are actually looking for, the things that we are testing. These are based on the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, the WCAG 2.0, and there's a general agreement that this is what you are using at the moment, but there's not so much a common understanding about what you actually have to test. So we see that people claim that they are testing according to WCAG, but a lot of different things are being tested. So within the EIII project, we created a W3C community group. It's called the AutoWCAG, the Automated WCAG Monitoring Community Group, where we try to address this issue that there are different ways of understanding how to test WCAG, and there are a lot of people who have joined this group. I think it's about 40 participants at the moment, and we have representatives of tool developers. I think there are representatives of 6 different tools in that group, and we are working to define tests in a way that make them repeatable, that can be implemented for those steps that can be done by a tool, and then the other main goal is to provide test descriptions that can be followed by non-experts. So to have very clear, simple, and to select a sample, we have to find ways of aggregating the data that we collect in that way. And we've done some research in that area as well. So there's it's a rather scientific report that will be published at the end of the project, where you can see comparisons. So we looked at requirements, and then we compared these different approaches and came up with some ideas about how you can do the sampling, how you can do it in an efficient way so that you don't have to test a lot of pages, but can really focus on a few pages so that you have the chance to do expert testing on those and get representative results for a website in that way. Yeah, the third area I'd like to highlight is the data analysis. So as I said, you can collect a lot of data in accessibility, or you might even have data from different sources, so from a manual expert evaluation and from automated testing. And we were trying to come up with ways to combine these data so that you can take results from different sources and come up with a joint result for the websites. This is actually something that has turned out to be very difficult because, as Susanna also said in her study, these things are not well documented. So you get the overall result, but sometimes you're not really sure what has been tested. So in that area, the main result or the main outcome of the project is that we like to define a common way of reporting so that you can have a chance to compare and combine the results in future iterations of evaluations. Yeah, and then finally, in the beginning, Mikael said that we at FTB have also been looking into audiovisual media and how you can do accessibility testing for that. So that has been done by my colleague who can't be here today because it's his daughter's birthday. So I'll try to answer any questions on that topic. And just a quick overview of what we have done. So we have 2 sources of accessibility guidelines in that area. On the one hand, we have the W3C guidelines for web content and for user agents that are very relevant for audiovisual media. And on the other hand, we have a lot of guidelines and best practices that are used by broadcasters all across Europe. And we try to combine these two to come up with a methodology that you can test, especially for captioning and for audio descriptions, but also for other access services. And there will also be a document at the end of the project where all these topics are covered, and you can find the methodology that we have developed there.
Terrific, Annika. Thank you very much. So you covered a lot of the AutoWCAG and sort of a little bit of the automated testing. So now we're going to move to the other side, which is the manual testing part.